Welcome everyone to the captive audience. Sorry, we're starting a few minutes late here. I'm flying solo tonight. Couldn't nail down a guest in time. We'll have Stephen Lloyd, the Young Republican chair, on tomorrow night, and we're just taking it day by day here. But wanted to run through the headlines with you guys because I think you're going to find this very interesting and useful. We are looking at a gargantuan problem at the border that has only grown as it becomes more obvious. And one of the headlines this morning was that more than 12 million illegal border crossers, including gotaways, since fiscal year 2021. Hi, Lori and Bobby. Good to see you guys. And so this is a best guess, apparently. It's an officially reported internal gotaway data, and the totals are considered by border agents to be the best guess and believed to be underreported by the same people that are calling it the best guess by between 10 and 20%. To give you an idea, if it's 20%, then there aren't 12 million, but 16 million. So this is quite something. And I think that one of the biggest problems we're facing is that we don't actually know what's happening at the border. We know it's bad. We know that the data that has been reported and really is required to be reported is underreporting what's going on. But we also know that enormous sums of money, enormous numbers of people, enormous amounts of drugs, fentanyl, meth, and frankly, at this point, after the terrorist arrest, the ISIS terrorist arrest, the terrorists who came in 2023 and been hanging around in the country for almost a year, that got busted when they started talking about bombs, we're just scratching the surface at this point. And we don't really know how big a problem this is. This is actually why we need to make an election issue of just getting to the truth. Not listening to people who say that there's no problem or that we already have the data and everything's fine, but getting to the truth, because the truth's going to be worse than what we're operating on in a consensus fashion as fact. So there's a lot to consider in this one, but that one right there stands out probably as the biggest issue. A lot of other news today. I saw that after 7.5 years, the entity called Snopes.com, it's a fact checker, has finally admitted that President Trump never said that neo-Nazis in Charlottesville that were present in the protests and counter protests going on were fine people. In fact, he said exactly the opposite and said they should be condemned, and that there are people that have nothing to do with those neo-Nazis on both sides of the debate about the removal of a statue that are fine people. And that's a reasonable thing to say, but they spent 7.5 years lying about it in the media. And a fact checker, Snopes.com, finally admitted today, after 7.5 years, that they needed to correct the record. What I find interesting about that is that seems to have everything to do with an upcoming event. As you know, so today's the 24th. So this Thursday, the 27th, the first presidential debate between President Trump and President Biden is going to be taking place. And it's frankly, mop up an aisle 4. It might be a message, and this is the speculation that is out there. It might be a message to President Biden not to use this false claim during the debate. Now, I think there's going to be hoax after hoax after hoax thrown at President Trump by President Biden, because Biden's got nothing else. And this is the best that Biden's going to ever be. Whatever he is in this debate, it's all downhill from there. And this is something um, that always ends up being reported falsely by the media, where they talk about how he's done better than he's ever done. He looked energetic and vivacious. And there's such abundant evidence that it's false. And yes, President Trump said he will take a drug test right before the debate or right after. And Biden, if Biden does, which I think the Democrats are out there claiming that that there is no truth to the fact that some enhancements are provided to Joe Biden. But it's so obvious to see how differently he looks and operates, and so many things that could actually be included or provided to him in order to enhance his ability to temporarily function at a higher level. And frankly, it's pretty obvious that the drugs that I'm sure they've been giving him are not going to persist anymore. Like it's becoming less and less effective as they go. So just skimming the headlines here. James Comer, is it James Comer? I can't remember his first name, but he's Congressman Comer. He demands that pro-Palestinian group produce documents related to allegedly funding illegal protests. And these protests cost money, especially to sustain them in the way they do indefinitely across the country, to organize them, to keep people fed, all that stuff. And we're at a point where I think congressional oversight is absolutely necessary. This is actually why it's super important that Congress remain in Republican hands. And that's regardless of what happens in all the other important elections this fall. We have to have the ability to prevent all the bad things, particularly taxes and spending related stuff that the House controls, but also the ability to provide oversight and to demand and get to answers. There's probably going to be 10 things that Biden should be impeached for if we could get to the truth of all this stuff that's going on. And even if he weren't convicted in the Senate, this is really the ultimate enforcement mechanism that the House of Representatives has when a completely out of control rogue executive branch is operating the way they are. And they're choosing to not enforce a whole bunch of laws that are laws, and they're doing things that don't have any legal basis to them. This student loan repayment plan that the Biden administration is coming out with lacks a basis in the law. The first one was entirely rejected by the Supreme Court as not authorized by Congress. What can Congress do if the president decides to do things that are not authorized by Congress and he tries to do them anyway? Impeachment. You can also battle the power of the purse and deprive the president of the funding for these things. But even then, I think the president's shown that, or at least the people running the Biden administration who are not the president, this is something that I think we're finding more and more is being done in our name all the time. And unless they get caught and taken to court, they're just doing it. We will find out about a lot of this stuff if we can get a change of administration, but we can't lose the ability to make sure that we hold on to Congress and are able to do it directly. Otherwise, just think how in the dark we'd be, how much the fake news media would actually be out there claiming things that are still not true and claiming that everything is being said, even if it's just well-founded speculation, are complete falsehoods. They'd probably still be claiming the laptop's real, or not, claiming that the Hunter Biden laptop isn't real. They'd probably still be claiming that if that were the case right now. So this debate's coming up, and this is going to be important. But I also think that the expectations are extremely low. Like if Joe Biden basically doesn't completely lose his mind and just start uttering gibberish and have giant gaps, if he just gets through it without making any gigantic errors, but frankly doesn't even answer a single question, he'll be lauded as a great success. You can guarantee that, because the stuff he's doing right now to the country is being lauded as good or great by much of the media. So I think we've got a challenge here, which is there's the debate, and then there's what they're going to do with the information from the debate. Having said that, I think they obviously are having one of the earliest debates of all time, presidential general election debates of all time. And they're doing it because, frankly, the Democrats need to figure out, if the bottom falls out, that they can go with plan B, the plan that allows them to salvage their the presidential election by replacing Biden. And yeah, I don't know where Vice President Giggles is, but they don't put her out there when things are going badly. I don't even know why they put her out there at all. I know they sent her to something in Europe because Biden had to go back and spend 2 weeks preparing for the debate. But also because he just absolutely struck out and laid a big egg on D-Day at Normandy. And they're like, well, he didn't look presidential, so I guess that trying to look presidential thing's not going to work out. And it didn't. By the way, here's the article to the drug test. I'm trying to think. Did I post the? Yes, I did. No, I didn't. I didn't post the other earlier article, which I mentioned about the border crossings. So let me post that, because you do need to take a look at the details of these things. They really do matter. The House Homeland Committee chair said to DHS, Office of Inspector General, release the unredacted report of the inadequate asylum vetting. This is important because he's able to see it, but they've created this system or this circumstance where the Office of an Inspector General doesn't have to release the unedited one. Isn't that crazy? That there's a version of this report telling us just how dangerous the vetting system is allowing the people being brought into this country to be. So that's how apparently they're able to let terrorists in and say they haven't found anything wrong with them, because it's stupid. You actually can't, unless Tajikistan has one of these, 21st century crime and crime reporting systems that actually consider people in Tajikistan being terrorists a crime, you won't know anything, and you won't be able to stop somebody from committing a terrorist act. So Mark Green, who is that Homeland Security chair, is pressuring the Homeland Security Office of Inspector General to reveal this entire report about the asylum seekers. And by the way, this isn't just terrorists. This is recidivist criminals. These guys who are getting in there associated with gangs that go and rape and bash in the heads of women and young moms that are out for a jog in their what they thought to be a safe neighborhood. This is serious. And you know what? How many people are going to say that they thought we should have gotten to see this report and fully grasped just how much of a danger Biden has unleashed on this country after a terrorist attack occurs that can trace its source to someone crossing that border and passing right through this vetting system that they claim to have? And by the way, their vetting system, there's uh, an app called the CBP One app, and it's somebody who wants to come into the U.S. can just claim asylum via this app, and then when they come to the port of entry, they just let them in because supposedly they've been pre-screened. Which so it all hinges on whether or not what this inspector general found is that there's a real system in place or not. And I think it's pretty obvious that the chair of Homeland Security is saying, you know what? Not. Um, I really hope that this is something that we can uh, get to the truth of, because people that you care about and I care about personally might actually be the victims. And you're not going to be satisfied with this information having not been fully vetted and disclosed to the public. There will be hell to pay. And Joe Biden, I think he's going to be sitting in a chair at a facility drooling a year from now, regardless of whether he wins the presidential election or not, because he's not going to be serving for much of his term. They will declare him unfit to serve because he's going to barely make it through the presidential election if he does, and he's certainly not going to make it through 4 years. Yeah, I don't know the story about Pat behind the vaccines, the measles situation, but it makes sense because if it's been wiped out in a country that doesn't have it, it's coming from somewhere, and we know that there's unlimited numbers of unvetted people being let in. That's been true all the way through COVID, when there were loads of people coming in and we were being told that they were perfectly safe, while none of us could go to like a sporting event or school, etc. So, by the way, I found that Charlottesville link. It's funny because Snopes said this, and this is being reported, but you can't find it on Snopes.com. I just went to Snopes.com. It's not there. So Snopes.com, the most high profile fact check where they got something right after 7.5 years, not on the homepage of Snopes.com. That should tell you everything. Really. I mean, that's it's I'd say I was dumbfounded, except I'm just not surprised anymore. You know? So, how many people do you think? How many of you have heard about the protests that took place and turned violent outside a synagogue in Los Angeles? A synagogue. Well, there was video coverage of this. Remember, I mentioned that one of the that James Comer, the congressman, was demanding information about pro-Palestinian groups funding these protests. If they funded this, they committed a crime because they funded something that was intentionally violent. They should be subject to liability, having their asses sued, because they just violated the civil rights of people trying to go to church. That's what they did. There's no right to protest and stop people from attending church service. There isn't. So where are all the people that are supposed to fight against discrimination and violation of civil rights? What about this? Isn't there a federal civil rights commission that I believe is empowered to do this? I want to know, are they going to be now? All the Democrats, by the way, the Gavin Newsom, Biden, all these people that are very concerned about the political emergency this creates for them, are coming out and saying it's appalling. There's no excuse for targeting a place of worship. Such anti-Semitic hatred has no place in America or California, etc. They said this kind of stuff. So what are they doing about it? It happened. Looks like they weren't very serious about preventing it from happening. I can tell you that if that were a bunch of um, trans-hating, uh, transphobic racists that were attacking trans people, they would have called the National Guard out. Yeah. By the way, Antifa is now called Trans Tifa by many people because if you look at Andy Ngo's reporting, time after time, he has to tell the name that's been reported, especially when someone's been arrested, the name that's been reported, and how that's an alias for their real name, which is often of a different gender. I don't know how many of these people actually are getting hormone therapy or surgeries, but it doesn't really matter. This has become deeply embedded in what Antifa's become. You know, real men and women are actually becoming hard to find in Antifa. So Trans Tifa, check it out. Did I post? Yeah, I did post the synagogue thing. I like this. There is an effort now, a tour bus actually, about taking back Title IX. And Title IX is Martina Navratilova, famous tennis player who's gay, lesbian, is actually fighting to take back Title IX from the Biden administration because it was something that allowed women to compete in sports and and have somewhat of a level playing field with men in terms of being able to have these sports in schools. And there's some downsides to how that operated in terms of overall athletic competition. However, now the Biden administration is trying to rewrite it to make trans and all these other genders protected classes, essentially to the detriment of women who were supposed to be the original beneficiaries of Title IX. It was a 1972 statute guaranteeing equal opportunities for women and men in programs and activities that receive federal assistance. And so now, and I've noticed this, that people who are pushing back the hardest and trying to defend women and trying to defend teenagers who are being told that they're trans, often by their teachers or by social media, etc., that the gay community is actually pushing back on this the hardest. In other words, the LGBTQIA plus whatever, blah 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 blah, XYZ, that the L, G, and B are finding themselves not agreeing with the T and all that rest of the stuff. That's what's happening now. And I think it's about time. I did hear that one of the issues is they're taking gay teenage boys, and saying, actually, you're the wrong gender. Go get a surgery. Other times, they're actually telling people that they're trans when, in fact, they're just teenagers. There was a German study that I came across last week. First, I will post this story about Title IX, but also there was a very good. Let me see if I can find it here. It was a German. Let's see. German study shatters transgender myth. Majority suffer from mental illness. So there's a number of things that came out of this. One is that that there are people experiencing mental illness who think they're actually trans. And then also, this is a startling thing. They said that, let me see if I can find it here. One fact that really, here we go. The study, which tracked a large number of individuals diagnosed with gender dysphoria over a period of 9 years, these are young people, found that the vast majority of people who identified as transgender will grow out of this diagnosis within 5 years. This indicates that the identity is not a permanent state as many have claimed, but rather a phase for many individuals. And so what happens if that results in somebody getting permanently changed by gender hormone therapy or gender surgery? Well, that's awful. That's really bad. And that's a permanent change. You can't grow out of that. In fact, it's a permanent disfigurement, really. And uh, here's another fact that this study uncovered. The study also found that a majority of young people diagnosed with gender dysphoria also suffer from other psychological conditions. This means that there's a high likelihood of underlying mental health issues that need to be addressed instead of simply confirming and affirming a transgender identity. The study showed that nearly 3/4 of young people who identify as transgender also have at least one psychiatric condition, such as depressive disorders, anxiety disorders, personality disorders, and more. The prevalence of a transgender diagnosis has also seen an increase over time, with a staggering 780% rise in diagnosis in recent years. While some of this increase may be due to changes in coding and increased awareness and acceptance of transgender individuals, it cannot be ignored that there's been a dramatic spike in the number of people identifying as transgender in such a short period of time. This could indicate a cause for concern, as it is unclear whether this increase is due to a real rise in gender dysphoria or if it's a result of a social contagion or overdiagnosis. So, and there's one specific item here relating to women, teenage girls. The study also found that the group most likely to change their minds about being transgender were young females aged 15 to 19. This group had the highest rate of reversion to their birth sex, with 72.7% desisting within 5 years. So I can't think of a better argument, not only for minors to not be eligible to decide on their own that they need these surgeries, but also, frankly, doctors shouldn't be authorizing it. There should be an extremely high bar for that. And I'm not sure parents should be eligible to do this. There's a whole bunch of things that parents, for instance, can't go and say, I know you're not 21, but you're my son or daughter, and you're 14, 15. Here's a beer. You don't have the power to do that, actually, under state law, at least not in Oregon. So why can you do it here, where you're disfiguring somebody, and it may actually be a phase that somebody just grows out of within a few years? Yeah, I think that 18 years old, if somebody wants to do that, then at that point they're an adult. But you know what? I don't want to pay for it. I don't think any of us should pay for it. It's like any other surgery. I don't think we should be paying for boob jobs or other cosmetic surgery for people. That's an optional thing. If it were part of health insurance coverage, and it had to do with recovering from an accident or something, that's different. But when it's an enhancement, when it's not really necessary for your health, I got to say that's something that you pay for yourself. That's totally reasonable. But we have been unable to get through to people on this one because there seems to be an ever increasing push uh, to make these things required and included in health insurance, mandating that. And this is health insurance that, by and large, is very difficult to afford. That's the one thing that the Obamacare never did do. It didn't bring down the cost of health insurance. It just made it so that you could get it even if it was no private insurer would provide the coverage. However, the costs of the health care costs have gone up. They didn't do anything to reduce it, which means that you got these giant deductibles and these giant premiums that you have to pay. There's nothing so expensive as free health care. But there's a lot of national news stories here. I want to kind of jump in to some of the stuff that's happening here at the state level. Here's a fascinating one. So Lars Larson said, homeless spending is up 500%. Homeless spending is up 500%. Now we know homelessness has gone up dramatically here in the Portland metro area, in Multnomah County. And they only put together this joint office on homelessness 8 years ago, the one that joins the city of Portland with Multnomah County. But the amount of dollars being has gone up 500%. But the problem's got worse. In fact, they're not even close to solving it, and they're not getting people off the street. The director of the Joint Office on Homeless Services, Dan Field, receives a salary that's more than twice that of the governor of the state of Oregon. That Tri-County Portland metro area, so Washington, Clackamas, and Multnomah, now spend $500 million directly on homelessness, which we know is largely addiction. That's what it is. It's people that, in many cases, are uninterested, unwilling, incapable of securing a home or an income of any kind because they're doing fentanyl and meth and killing themselves. Multnomah County plans to spend millions giving away tents and tarps again. The city of Portland is spending millions to clean it up. So we found a way to spend money increasing a problem, promoting it, and then spending money to clean it up. You can get to $500 million pretty quickly, forever, with that kind of approach. It says indirectly, more than half of all police calls involve the homeless. More than 40% of calls for emergency, medical, or fire involve the homeless. And yet, chronic homelessness is actually increasing. So is addiction. So why are we listening to people that give us advice and produce these kinds of results? Yeah, free tents. And the drugs aren't free, but they're almost free. I mean, if 80 cents for a fentanyl pill, that's not very much money. And that's all they need. And then they're addicted and then they can't stop. This is something to look at. By the way, Multnomah and Portland, if you haven't been following this, have had a big to do over the so-called deflection program. So how we technically did some reforms to Measure 110 to recriminalize drug possession of these dangerous types of drugs, the deadly ones. Well, Measure 110 is no longer the Measure 110 it was. It's been partially recriminalized. However, there's a catch, I should say. House Bill 4002 reestablished drug possession as a crime, adding back some accountability levers, but legislators emphasized the need to keep a health-first focus, urging counties to adopt alternative pathways that would deflect drug users to treatment rather than send them to the criminal justice system, even if they're committing crimes, it sounds like. Unfortunately, Multnomah County officials seem intent on going down with the ship, is what it says, led by Multnomah County Chair Jessica Vega Peterson. I knew when she got elected this is going to be bad because she has totally bought in on all of the worst garbage of the harm reduction and housing first model, which is infinite amount of money and worse results. A small group, including outgoing District Attorney Mike Schmidt of The Schmidt Show, he's been fired by the voters in May, and Multnomah County Sheriff Nicole Morrissey O'Donnell have been privately meeting to draw up plans for a deflection program in advance of the date that House Bill 4002, the reformed Measure 110, becomes effective. What they've come up with, however, smacks of Measure 110, the sequel, and fails to emphasize either treatment or accountability. What's the central piece of the strategy? Give those caught with drugs the choice of being arrested or being taken to a drop-off center where they can just walk away after check-in. No sign up for treatment necessary. It's as if we've learned nothing from the escalating fentanyl deaths and the ineffective approach embedded in Measure 110. This is just Measure 110 unreformed. They are trying to evade the actual purpose of that legislation. And Multnomah County's plan doesn't skimp on just accountability. It also lacks any specificity about what treatment services could be available. So in other words, it's all problems and no treatment, right? Which is what Measure 110 originally was. Who it doesn't say what the services will be, who will provide them, or even where the currently existent drop-off center would be built. And by the way, they had something analogous to these drop-off centers before, and they would have these, safe rest zones or whatever. They come in, they give you needles, you can do whatever you want, pretty much just go right back out. And, maybe somebody would talk to you about going into treatment, but most of them wouldn't because the drug's right out there and just go right back out. And it falls short of providing the so-called evidence-based solutions that they said they were going to have to pursue when they put this together. Deflection does not require proof of an assessment or specific follow-up. Steps be reported to the criminal justice system. So you commit a crime, you get arrested, and you don't have to prove you've done anything, and you just go right back out the door. By the way, this is the same county that declared a 90-day fentanyl emergency, and the problems only intensified during the emergency. And the emergency ended, and they're like, okay, emergency over. This is just going to continue. The only solution to this is to boot these people out. Now, this has happened with Schmidt. He's not leaving. They're actually keeping the new district attorney, Nathan Vasquez, the one that's going to take office January 1st. They're keeping him out of these discussions, even though this is talking about the enforcement of a law that's going to start being enforced just 4 months before the end of the year. And they're not talking to the guy who's actually going to have to enforce it. The top broker of the Measure 110 plan, the reform, is unhappy with Multnomah County's deflection plan. His name is Dan Rayfield. He was the Speaker of the House. And if that name sounds familiar, not only did he usher that bill through, but then after the session was over, he officially declared that he's running for Attorney General. So what's happened is, even though this guy stood by and did nothing for 3 years while everything went to hell in a handbasket, and he spent his time defending and preserving Measure 110 until they finally were shamed into reforming it, he now claims he's outraged about the deflection program in Multnomah County. And it's not because he is suddenly gotten a new attitude towards what should be done about drug addiction and homelessness. It's because this hurts his reelection chances. This makes his core theme of "look what I did, elect me." It really hurts him, and it should, because the problem is these legislators never intended to follow who they wanted to take the victory lap and take credit for it, and then get to the voters and say, "Look what I did, elect me," and then just win, and then go back to business as usual once they're elected, which I guess he's saved a lot of time here, but this is a political emergency for him, just like the 90-day fentanyl emergency in Multnomah was a political emergency. It wasn't an emergency where you actually like, oh, we've got an emergency, we got to fix this really fast, let's get all hands on deck and do whatever's necessary. It was just a bunch of smoke and mirrors, a kabuki dance, which, if you're familiar with those terms, it's all fake. Well, and a lot of this has resulted in greater and greater problems of a sustained manner. And one of the groups that's being impacted dramatically by this, by the way, Will Lathrop for Attorney General, period. Just fix the problem by getting rid of the people that have been part of the problem and replacing them with a real candidate that can really get things done. Will Lathrop for Attorney General. So one group of folks that's being hit really hard are churches in Portland. Apparently, serial thieves are going after and stealing stuff from churches. St. Michael the Archangel Church in downtown Portland, a burglar broke into it 3 times in 1 week and stole sacred items from the church. The church has offered a $1,000 reward for return of its sacred tabernacle and a holy item inside it. The items were later discovered in a garbage dumpster. I don't think if I'm that burglar, I want to be facing. He's not going to like the message from St. Peter, when he gets up there. But he's probably going to be taking a down elevator. But hey, the problem is the people that are enabling this here. Anyway, Father Ignacio Lorente said the video shows a man camping on the church steps who then broke in through the bell tower of the church and stole keys for the office. The thief then returned twice the next day, stealing a bicycle, a speaker, a gold-painted wooden tabernacle containing the Blessed Sacrament or Holy Eucharist. Police arrested a suspect, but then later released him. The fact that the thief, so they've got the guy dead to rights on video, and they've released him. The fact that this thief keeps returning is a problem for victims and an issue with Portland's defunded police, who lack the resources for investigations and quick responses. Well, I don't know why they lack the resources to keep somebody that they've arrested that they have dead to rights on burglary charge. I don't get that one. I smell a Schmidt show. Anyway, the Portland serial consignment shop thieves, serial utility trailer thieves, and serial luxury item thieves are abound everywhere in Portland. And the church offered a public call to identify the man and to call police. He was wearing a jacket with the image of Mother Teresa on it when he stole the items. Mother Teresa, famous church burglar. The church also asked the community to pray for him. I think that is the least we can do. But we should be praying for the police that don't have the resources to get this done. We should be praying for changing the hearts and minds of the people, and then eventually changing the people who are leading our city, our county, and our state. You're just not going to get anything better if this is the way we operate. Now, these guys also at the state level have been responsible for fixing what they claim to be a public defender crisis. By the way, there are more public defenders than there are prosecutors, same number of cases. But apparently we don't have enough defenders. Do the math. But in order to avert a potential constitutional showdown because of the failure to execute on what Tina Kotek and the Democrats said was one of their highest priorities, they have formed a new public defender division in the state of Oregon. It's supposed to provide the best legal defense possible. A guy named Micah Moskowitz is part of what they claim to be a new breed of defender in Oregon County courthouses, one who works directly for the government, not as a private attorney under contract. And that's how they've been handling this so far. At some point, the private attorneys under contract are going to have to explain why they couldn't get the job done if this guy can do it. But if this guy can't do it, then the problem goes deeper, right? Anyway, it's this is to remedy the so-called unrepresented defendants. They claim there's about 2,500 of them that have remained out of custody, which is an increase of 500 defendants from a year ago. Another 120 people actually sat in jail without a lawyer, which usually means that they've committed a crime bad enough that they can't let them out. And yet they have a problem that they might be forced by a federal district judge to release them. There was one in Washington County who was putting a lot of pressure to have this fixed, or he would order people to be released from jail, Judge Michael McShane. And but apparently the statewide order doesn't apply to murder suspects or people who violate their release conditions and end up back in custody. So supposedly if you end up back in custody, you're supposed to be, wonder what they'll do with the church thief. Anyway, 3-judge panel in the Ninth Circuit or Ninth Circus Court of Appeals in May upheld McShane's order, though the state would seek a further review by the full Ninth Circuit Court bench. So we'll see what happens. I just think that this is becoming obvious that the people who said this is such a high priority, they literally put hundreds of millions of dollars more money into this, and they can't fix it. And they won't fix it, because when you're trying to do everything the wrong way, and the state's two-year public defense budget was 598 million. It is now 1.3 billion. 1.3 billion is what it'll reach soon. And these are people who don't know how to fix IT problems. They don't know how to send the right amount of unemployment checks, or even to send them at all. No, these are people who shouldn't be given more responsibility and given more resources. But nevertheless, that's what is happening in the state of Oregon. Let's move on to Tina Kotek. So I saw this headline and I started experiencing immediate deja vu. Oregon teachers will soon need science of reading training extending to reading disabilities. This is the thing, the deja vu. Governor Kotek rolls out initiatives to improve literacy rate. Do you remember when she took office? Didn't she roll out something to improve the literacy rate? Here we are, 2 years in. And she is now rolling out something which she says is going to do something that she already said she was going to do. I don't need literacy training in order to read that and say, I think I've read that before. And this is somebody who is great at getting press releases and headlines, but not actually fixing anything. We have an education system that's literally on its knees right now. It's on its knees. Yeah. And they reduce resources for reading, writing, and math, but they also lowered standards. So they can't even get the job done with standards that are lowered, so that literally almost anybody, whether they can read or not, can graduate from high school in the state of Oregon. And that's because there was a political emergency. Again, the political emergency was the high school graduation rate was really bad. So, good Oregon Catalyst article. Where is Kotek hiding? Where in the world was Governor Kotek? Where in the world has Governor Kotek been hiding? Last year, Kotek had was gone extensively for long periods of time to tour all 36 counties of Oregon on a listening tour. When she announced she was finished, there was nothing to report and very little press along the way. It was all for show. Now Kotek is going back to visit around the state, this time to visit every tribe. Kotek proudly pledging that this year started with her pledging that she was only going to submit one single bill during the entire 2024 special legislative session. When the session ended, Kotek let the passed bills, nearly 100, pile up on her desk. No real concern, since Kotek approved nearly 99% of the bills anyway. Since then, she's disappeared from the news. Her spouse has not disappeared from the news, but she has. Here is the history-making events brewing in Oregon over the last 4 months while she has been self-disappeared. March, Portland downtown rated nation's #1 worst for business vacancies. In April, Oregon sees record-breaking rise in anti-Semitic attacks. You hearing anything from Kotek about that? Is she taking any action? In May, another county voted to leave Oregon for Greater Idaho. If you have 14 counties out of 36 that want a divorce, that's a problem. In May, Oregon rated among the nation's worst birth rates, declining children population. So we're shrinking and we're getting older because we're not getting more children here. In June, employment data hearings exposed a scandal of delayed benefits dragging on for years. Well, I just mentioned that. People can't get these unemployment benefits, and it drags on for years when they're due that. In June, Oregon manufacturing neared historic lows. Also in June, Oregon's largest nurse strike begins. Also in June, it is announced that a record number of people have had their electricity shut off. And the media criticizes Multnomah County for bypassing the legislature's Measure 110 rollback. And it was announced that Oregon had $2.9 billion in accounting errors. It was announced this month. Here is what Tina Kotek has done press releases about between March and June. See if they match up with the other headlines I just mentioned. Kotek announces Dolly Parton Library event. Kotek announces her visit to the Coquille tribe. Kotek announces her digital diversity plan. Did she run on that? Was that really important to voters? Kotek announces her visits to the Grand Ronde tribe. Kotek announces Clean Tech Task Force. Kotek announces her visit to Umatilla tribe. Kotek announces her visit to Siletz tribe. You know, they asked the question because, you know, we have the kid governor competition here in Oregon. And there was an article that was published here in the Oregon Catalyst that said, what if Governor Kotek were replaced by a fifth grader? Would anyone notice? Because a fifth grader could have issued those press releases easily. Kotek has announced spending allotment for projects like education, ports, technology, but you can't solve these massive problems of the last 4 months of the drug crisis, billion-dollar errors, counting errors, children disappearing, empty office buildings, counties voting to leave the state, with symbolic cash dumps of tax dollars. These are serious problems. They need the full, unadulterated attention of the governor, and it's not getting it. And this is a person, the governor, who looked in the camera, and I saw the ads. She essentially ran for governor of Multnomah County in the election, and she said, look, if there's a way to solve the fentanyl crisis, of course I'm going to do it. She's not doing it. So there you go. That's our roller coaster ride of news. I know there's far more. I know that today is actually the second anniversary of the Dobbs decision. I think a lot of people it would be good to have I wanted to have a discussion potentially with Representative Ed Deal. He's very thoughtful on this topic about how we need to view the circumstances that now exist politically in light of the Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe versus Wade. And so I'm hoping to have him on in a couple of weeks. So remember, we're going to come back to that. We are. And I can promise that that there are many, many meaty topics that I could not give time to today, but I will give time to in the coming weeks. We may know very soon who President Trump's vice presidential nominee is going to be. Stay tuned. I will tell you that there's one pretty good report I got to watch. It was on Fox, but I watched it on YouTube. I'm posting that here, and you can go watch it for yourself and see who the one clear front runner in terms of benefit to President Trump and the overall Republican ticket would be. But you may have your own opinion. And you may also say, well, I don't know if this poll really is a determining factor. And of course, CNN has just announced new rules for the Trump-Biden debate this Thursday. Let's keep an eye on this, because I think there actually are going to be some serious issues over how that debate is run. The Communist News Network, I think it's their last chance to appear to be fair and impartial. We'll see. So check it out this Thursday. I'll be back tomorrow night with another episode of The Captive Audience. Stephen Lloyd, our frequent guest host here on the program, will be joining me. We'll hear about what young people have on their minds, and we'll just tackle the latest in the news and articles. Yeah, it will be fun, Bobby. I promise. Stephen's a great guy, and I always enjoy having him on. And so we will see you tomorrow night on the